The strongest of the strong in Jujutsu Kaisen, the strongest sorcerers of all time, will be broken down in this video and even ranked at the end, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Use your 6 eyes to locate and then smash that like button if you enjoy seeing Jujutsu Kaisen videos like this one on the channel and want to keep them coming. Make this the video you join the special grade fam if you haven't already by subscribing and hitting that notification bell to turn on all notifications so you don't miss future Jujutsu Kaisen videos and updates. And now, without further ado, let's jump into it, spoilers and all. So first up we have Yuki Tsukumo, who made her debut via flashback and in an Aoi Todo flashback no less. She's further hyped for me because she had such an impact on Todo, one of my favorite characters. After 3rd grader Todo beat up a high schooler with a bad attitude, he was just thinking that beating up a boring guy is boring. That's when Yuki showed up, congratulating him and asking the iconic question, what kind of girls are you into? At that point, he had a feeling that he wouldn't be bored for long. Then this hyped up character shows up again during chapter 76 during the Gojo and Geto flashback. Again, she shows up and asks this time Geto what kind of girls he's into. Soon enough, she tells Geto she is special grade sorcerer Yuki Tsukumo. And Geto is shaken, even sweating a bit when he says, "You're the ... Clearly her reputation precedes her. And she says, yeah, the no good special grade who doesn't take on any missions and just bums around overseas. With a response like that, how could you not love her? That's the real question. She goes on to say that she hates Jujutsu High and then clarifies saying she doesn't see eye to eye with the way the school does things. She says they treat the symptoms while she wants to get to the root cause. Yuki doesn't want to exorcise curses. She wants a world where curses don't even exist. Since curses are formed when cursed energy leaks from humans, she says there are 2 ways to eradicate them. 1. Eradicate cursed energy from all of humanity, and 2. Teach humans how to control their cursed energy. Geto is intrigued by number 1, but points out that Toji Zenin was the only one for whom cursed energy was completely eradicated. Yuki says cases like that of heavenly restriction are few and far between, so her focus is on the second method of teaching humans how to control their cursed energy. Yuki explains that Jujutsu sorcerers don't give birth to curses, excluding cases where sorcerers become curses after death. The cursed energy that leaks from them compared to non-sorcerers is really low. For sorcerers, it flows heavily within them. In general terms, she says if every single human became a Jujutsu sorcerer, curses would no longer be born, and this really gets to Geto. He says, then why not kill every non-sorcerer? She says it's an option, and that might be the easiest way. They could force evolve people and create a situation where survival rests on adapting to a sorcerer-based society, using fear and danger as a catalyst. Although Geto may be, she says she's not that crazy to try something like that. We'll get to this more when we discuss fellow special grade Geto later on in the video, but at this point, he was beginning to wonder if non-sorcerers are worth fighting for. She eventually takes off saying as fellow special grade sorcerers, her, Geto, and Gojo should get along. She also tells him not to worry about what happened with the Star Plasma vessel since, whether it was another vessel or another vessel was born, Tengen stabilized. She's the one that told Geto he'd eventually be the one to decide his true feelings and path, despite being torn now. So now we have a sense of her personality and evolving philosophy. During chapter 130, we learned that Todo learned how to use simple domain from Yuki, the counter domain technique that can neutralize a domain expansion's guaranteed hit function, another nod to her skill. Yuki finally confronts Pseudo Geto, aka Kenjaku, and the two explain how their philosophies differ at this point. Yuki says the next stage of humanity lies in breaking away from cursed energy, while ancient sorcerer and body snatcher Kenjaku says no, it lies in optimizing cursed energy. Yuki would rather have a peaceful world without cursed spirits, while Kenjaku obviously wants no such thing. Kenjaku says he thought she abandoned that method 12 years ago when Toji Zenin died, and she responds she was talking to Geto, but oh well. She answers anyway, saying she came back to original principles. Now let's jump to when Yuki actually fought Kenjaku. It's definitely her most telling fight to see how strong she actually is. After Choso took a crack at him, Yuki came in thanking him and saying good work big brother. She told the exhausted Choso to leave the rest to her. It's cool she has that Goku energy, and when she shows up, you just feel better and like things will be okay. Will they actually be okay though? We have to wait and see. Right away, Kenjaku points out that although she's a special grade, headquarters keeps a tight lid on intel about her curse technique. He couldn't get any information from the higher-ups either, so he decides it's best to keep her at a distance. That, coming from someone like Kenjaku, is definitely a big compliment. At first, she uses her Shikigami Garuda as a curse tool to quickly deal with a special grade curse spirit released by Kenjaku. It's even better that she attacks it by using Garuda as a soccer ball or football. Kenjaku is shocked when he sees its power, and that's when Yuki explains its mass. Pretty much Star Rage, her technique, allows her to give virtual mass to her or Garuda in order to deliver devastating destructive force. She punches Kenjaku and sends him flying. She breaks his bones in the process too. Kenjaku points out it's a concept that targets a curse technique. Mass so overwhelming it surpasses anything inside and outside. Kenjaku puts together that the increased mass doesn't affect her, because her speed isn't decreased. Yuki is quick enough to realize from her attack that Kenjaku must have a third curse technique that involves gravity, aside from his curse manipulation and techniques that allow him to transfer bodies. Both Kenjaku and Yuki think to themselves this fight is gonna be a pain, especially since Kenjaku assumes she probably has an expansion technique with high cursed energy output as a trump card. Kenjaku then uses domain expansion Womb Profusion. The plan was for Yuki to use simple domain and to buy time while Tengen works on neutralizing Kenjaku's domain, but we're quickly told they miscalculated. Like Sukuna in Shibuya, Kenjaku pulled off an amazing feat in which he opened his domain and activated a technique without closing the barrier, so there's no outer shell to remove. The domain is also so powerful it quickly strips Yuki of her simple domain. Somehow Tengen does manage to dispel it, but not before Kenjaku lands a devastating hit on Yuki. Kenjaku thinks it's all over, but he should know to expect more from a special grade sorcerer, and soon enough notices that her Shikigami is still there. She gets up too. Kenjaku assumes she uses reversed curse technique to heal while her Shikigami buys time, and he also decides he'll replenish his curse techniques. But then suddenly she appears and attacks. He blocks and asks why doesn't she heal, and she says, because I don't wanna. End quote. Man, I love her character. She has a smile on her bloody face as she fights. In the middle of the hand-to-hand fighting, Garuda wraps around Kenjaku. Kenjaku thinks that Yuki is at her limit. But then Choso comes in and Yuki makes Garuda so heavy Kenjaku can't fully avoid the bloodshot. But Kenjaku is a beast too and spins his head to deflect the piercing blood. Then Yuki kicks him, but we're told damage had already weakened Star Rage, otherwise Kenjaku would have been toast right there. Nevertheless, she and Choso keep on attacking. Yuki uses reverse curse technique to recharge, but it slowed down Star Rage and gave Kenjaku a chance to temporarily escape. When ready, she uses Garuda as a whip and devastates the battlefield with the destructive power. But before they can land a lethal blow, Kenjaku replenishes his curse technique and uses his aforementioned gravity powers to bring down Choso and the Garuda whip before they can hit him. Yuki, in the middle of battle, mind you, deduces that curse technique has a radius of 2 to 3 meters from the sorcerer and continues for 6 seconds. In that interval, she tries to attack. She goes in saying she's gonna win. She punches him again and again while she can, knowing she won't get another chance. But then he catches her arm and attacks with a tiny Uzumaki. The second attack goes straight through her, as Kenjaku explains she doesn't feel extra weight due to Star Rage, so while her density increases, her tensile strength doesn't. And tensile strength is the ability of a material to withstand a maximum amount of tensile stress without failure. In other words, instead of her body being pulled or stretched by the attack, the stress is too much and it tears right through her. He then stomps on her, separating her body into 2 halves. Yuki, being the absolute monster she is, even grabs Kenjaku by the foot with an arm after this happens. She smiles, saying Star Rage's alterations in mass don't affect me, but only up to a certain density. If there's no limit, Kenjaku realizes that she can create a black hole, which possesses extreme density and immense gravity. Neither matter nor even light can escape. We're told in terms of density, imagine the Earth shrunk to a diameter of 2 centimeters. Yet somehow Kenjaku even survives this final insane trump card. He explains that the curse technique anti-gravity system was engraved in Yuji's mom. Through lapse, he was able to avoid the restrictions on unstable output and activation time by using his own body as a domain. He took a gamble, he says. It could have blown up up the whole world, but Tengen's barrier and Yuki's will suppressed it, so he has them to thank for surviving. Pretty insane stuff. And so Yuki, the special grade, who gave Todo his scar during one of her harsh training sessions, was defeated, but man, did she ever prove why she deserved to be a special grade, while also letting Kenjaku show his immense power too. Although she died in this epic battle, her memory lives on, and whenever we see Todo's scar, we can use it as a reminder of her and how badass she was right to the end. Next, we gotta look at special grade sorcerer Yuta Okkotsu. Jujutsu Kaisen 0 is where we see his introduction. He actually begs Rika, the cursed spirit that haunts and protects him, to not hurt the bullies that are bothering him, but she doesn't care and wrecks them. That's why you shouldn't bully right there. Also, when Yuta tries to hurt himself, she steps in to protect him. We'll later get into how he's actually the reason she still haunts him. Gojo is actually the one that originally told him that the curse attached to him can help people depending on how it's used, and he has to learn to control its power. When his fellow students meet Yuta for the first time, they are shocked by Rika's presence and quickly back off from him when Rika moves in to protect. We see Yuta and Rika's backstory, where they were kids in love. She gave him an engagement ring for his birthday. She then gets hit by a car to Yuta's shock, but that doesn't stop the promise of marriage and being together forever. The girl lives on as a curse, keeping that promise from long ago. The funniest thing though is when they hear this story, the other students are like, oh, so that's all it is. He's cursed by Rika, the girl who loves him. When they're on a mission, at first Maki is shocked to see that Yuta is already a special grade because of how he seems so worried and scared all the time. She thinks that it's a joke. Finally though, when they get eaten by a curse, everyone inside is suffering from being cursed except Yuta, who has a resistance to curses. Yuta steps up. He asks Rika to lend him her strength, and she does. The other curse is wrecked and Yuta and the others escape. Gojo even says freaky, so this is the true identity of special grade vengeful curse spirit Rika Orimoto. Women sure are scary, he adds. After the event, Yuta recalls that he told Rika they'll be together forever and ever, and he starts to think for the first time that it's not Rika cursing him, but he that's cursing Rika. And Gojo says he's always believed that love manifests the most distorted curses. And all this time, like with Yuji, Gojo is the one who is trying to keep Yuta from being executed. He even says that in case of an execution, he's on Yuta's side to the higher ups. Eventually, Gojo gives Yuta a katana so that he can channel the curse of Rika into it and control it. At first, Yuta is weak in hand-to-hand combat, but he keeps practicing. On one mission with Inumaki, together they defeat a curse without unleashing Rika, and Geto, who's behind the incident, witnesses it and is disappointed, saying, too bad, I was hoping I'd get to see the famous Rika, showing just how big of a deal Rika and thus Yuta's power are. Gojo then tells Ijichi not to be sorry for how things played out because the someone who cast another curtain on top of his and who ensured an unidentified semi-grade 1 curse was too strong. He knows it's Geto, who at this point is one of the 4 special grades and is considered the worst of all curse users. We'll be getting into him again later on in the video, but for now we're told he was expelled from Jujutsu High and has ended over 100 civilians. At this point, Geto has already adopted his kill all non-sorcerers view and tries to get Yuta to join him because he appreciates his fantastic power, as he calls it. Obviously, Yuta refuses to join him, and there's fascinating stuff here which we'll circle back to about Geto as well. The dude appears in front of Gojo and his students, and when Gojo tells him he's not leaving, he summons a curse and says, all your precious students are within my range. So Gojo can't even try to stop him. Someone being so confident in declaring war in front of Gojo, even a younger Gojo, is truly crazy and hypes up Geto as well. Geto knows he doesn't have much chance of winning the war, especially if the Jujutsu Society gets involved, but he thinks so highly of Rika that he thinks if he kills Yuta and takes the special grade Rika as his own cursed spirit, his chances of winning go up to 99%. He believes that if he kills the master, meaning Yuta, he can absorb the curse, meaning Rika. So he plans to isolate Yuta and strikes where he and Maki are. Gojo figures out what's happening and sends Inumaki and Panda to help. It's not long though before Geto takes down Maki, Inumaki, and Panda. Yuta sees this and flips out, unleashing Rika. During the fight, Geto, a curse expert, gives Rika the title Queen of Curses, showing how much he respects her and her power. She's even referred to as a spirit of endless cursed energy. Yuta shows how gifted he is when he uses Inumaki's advanced curse speech technique passed down from generation to generation, although to be fair, he does find it hard to use and it doesn't help him much here. At one point, he reinforces his fist and delivers a brutal and also satisfying punch to Geto's smug face. Even Geto has to say not bad. Geto mentions it's a good thing he came to kill him before Yuta learned to use Rika properly. Geto summons a special grade curse and combines his 4,461 curses into one using curse manipulation technique Maximum Uzumaki. Yuta commits to Rika and kisses her monstrous form, which hypes her up. The power of this weird love is enough to leave Geto badly hurt. He's amazed by this power that can change the world and says, if only I had Rika, I wouldn't have to collect all of these curses. He couldn't succeed this time, but says next time she'll be his, and that's when Gojo appears. It's revealed that Gojo purposely sent Inumaki and Panda there, knowing Geto would defeat them, and that would trigger Yuta's growth. Gojo also knew that someone who put Jujutsu sorcerers on a pedestal, like Geto, wouldn't kill young sorcerers without reason, so it's not quite as messed up as it seems at first. Gojo then proceeds to end his former best friend Geto. Back to Yuta, and Gojo points out that the Rika curse is broken. Gojo looked into Yuta's lineage. He is actually a descendant of Michizane Sugawara, meaning although distant, the two Gojo and Yuta are relatives. So Gojo says Yuta was right. Rika wasn't cursing him, he was cursing her. He refused to let her die. The cursor severs the bond tying the servant to the master, and if the cursed doesn't desire punishment, which Rika wouldn't, then the curse breaks. Rika's spirit actually thanks Yuta for giving her time and letting her be by his side. She says she's been happier these past 6 years than when she was alive, a crazy claim to be sure. Her spirit then disintegrates, telling him not to come over to the other side too soon. But never fear, even if his loved soul is at peace and the curse that bound them together is broken, Yuta keeps his fighting partner, the powerful Rika, around, as we'll see. But on to the main story. During chapter 11, Gojo hypes up Yuta, saying he's great along with third year Hakari, and says they'll be as good as him one day. No small compliment from the world's strongest sorcerer, and one who knows just how great he is. Then it was suggested that during the 2017 Goodwill event, it was one-sided simply because Yuta and Rika dominated. Then when Gojo confronted Kenjaku during chapter 90, Gojo points out how before he killed Geto, he was beaten up by Yuta. Yuta is praised for his ability to unconditionally copy cursed techniques and his boundless cursed energy. Although Kenjaku personally thinks that Yuta can't become the next Gojo, that doesn't mean he's right, and Gojo, like I said with his ego, wouldn't say someone could match him in power one day just willy-nilly. So then Yuta finally makes his main story debut with a splash when he rescues a girl from a curse. When he's talking to her, the curse attacks him from behind, only for Rika to take care of it instantly, leaving nothing there but a wall of splattered blood. Then he says he'll kill Itadori himself. When he finally comes face to face with Yuji, Yuji thinks it's Gojo at first, and then says no, it's something even creepier. Definitely high praise again for this dude. Yuji comments that he's fast even while holding a drawn katana. Yuta remarks that he's got even more cursed energy than Gojo-sensei, albeit he does clarify that sensei has the 6 eyes, so the energy that's lost when he activates a curse technique is infinitesimally close to zero. He does admit that Gojo is the best and that Gojo doesn't run out of cursed energy while Yuta can. Despite this, Yuji notices that Yuta's whole body, including his katana, is constantly surging with cursed energy, rather than being focused on one body part, making his attacks difficult to read, and it also means his attacks can be decisive and he can restrict all damage to a minimum. It's clear that although Yuji lasts for decently long, Yuta is in control of the fight, and when Yuji blocks his katana, Yuta simply says he's too focused on his katana and kicks him in the gut. Yuji for his part can't help but think that even a forward kick from Yuta is incredibly powerful. Yuta lands a slash on Yuji's body, but props to Yuji for successfully breaking Yuta's katana. Yuta thinks to himself that it's not surprising since Yuji is Gojo's pupil, so it was never going to be easy. And just when Yuji thinks he has a chance because they're both unarmed, Rika finally steps in, grabbing hold of his head. Yuta actually holds Rika back by saying they're just playing, while Yuji realizes he can't move. Rika is too strong. Yuta asks Rika to hold Yuji for him and he stabs Yuji with his broken off katana. He then apologizes to him. So it's pretty funny how this whole time, Yuta wasn't even using his strongest ability, namely Rika, and he could have, if he really wanted to, ended it at any point. As we'll see, even physically, he could have been holding back. When he shows up to Choso's fight, he quickly dispatches him with a number of extremely quick punches. While Naoya was on the ropes, Yuta took Choso out without even making it look like he's trying. He then heals Naoya with his reverse curse technique so that he can inform the superiors of Itadori's death. Of course, this was all an act, and Yuta actually saved Yuji. Yuji later wakes up and Yuta reveals that Gojo had asked him to look out for Yuji, and this was his way of doing it. Gojo pretty much trusted Yuta to take care of all the current first and second year students except Hakari. The even hyper and crazier thing was that Yuta did actually kill Yuji. He had to because he entered a binding vow, but he used his aforementioned reverse curse technique. At the time that his heart stopped, he instantaneously healed him with reverse curse technique. Not many people know Yuta can do this, so he got away with being appointed as Yuji's executioner. When asked why Yuta is doing this, he simply says because Yuji is important to people who are important to him. It's clear that Yuta also views Yuji as more innocent than himself because while Yuta actually created his own situation, as we saw, he says that Yuji's power was really forced upon him. During the Culling Games, Yuta is again praised for his cursed energy, which is called Bottomless, and for Rika's strength as well. Yuta also proclaims that he will be the one who will kill Kenjaku as he faces the creepy Kurorushi, the special grade cockroach curse spirit. Yuta nerfs himself in multiple ways at first by limiting himself to not using reverse curse technique or Rika, who is helping to protect everyone at the stadium. However, he finds himself in a situation where he has to use reverse curse technique to finish the special grade off and does so. Yuta then faces off against the reincarnated and very skilled sorcerers Takako Uro and Ryu Ishigori. Ishigori, for his part, compliments Yuta for how he supports his toughness with cursed energy so that it feels like he's knocking against a massive water tank. Eventually, the two think Yuta is reaching his limit, but that's when Yuta calls back Rika and asks her to give him everything she's got. It's pointed out that Rika is his cursed technique and can store cursed energy for him. The manga also spells it out to us that while connected to Rika through his ring, the following is possible: cursed technique use, Rika's complete manifestation, and cursed energy supply from Rika. At this point in the story, he can maintain a sustained connection for 5 minutes. He uses cursed speech to tell Uro not to move, and then he punches her from one side while Rika punches her from the other. Following that, Rika turns to Ishigori, whose technique gets easily deflected by Rika, and Ishigori thinks to himself that Rika might be even tougher than Yuta. While dealing with Uro, it's said that Yuta's curse technique is copied. All Yuta and the reincarnated sorcerers use domain expansion at the same time. Although they get broken down, we end up in a situation where Kurorushi's child and successor is present, along with Uro and Ishigori. Ishigori, though, attacks the other two, wanting Yuta for himself. He's one of those overpowered opponents that gets hungry for a challenge. They attack each other with directed high output blasts of cursed energy, which Yuta can do when Rika is manifested. P.S. It's also revealed that this Rika contains the last remnants of Rika's human will, so that is why this Rika quote-unquote weapon still acts like the first Rika too, even if it's not exactly the same thing or arguably as strong as it was before. Anyways, after the blasts cancel each other out, Yuta avoids another by using Uro's curse technique. As has been established, he can copy curse techniques, and I'm just waiting for him to copy Gojo's one day. He then uses Uro's thin ice barrier attack to attack again. Props to Ishigori, who is still fighting and even delivers a single blow that was even too much for the fully manifested Rika. The two keep up physical combat, but then Yuta throws him to the ground and Ishigori gets hit by his own curse technique, which Yuta redirected with Uro's technique. Ishigori, being the boss he is defeated with a smile, thanking Yuta for filling his hunger for battle. Although credit must be given to Ishigori for pushing Yuta and this version of Rika so far, ultimately Yuta gets the win, again showing his own skill and prowess, which will only grow from here as pointed out by Gojo. He also needed to keep his opponents alive so he could have them transfer points to him, so on some level he was arguably holding back as well. Given Yuta's seemingly bottomless cursed energy, his improvement of its use over time, and his ability to add overpowered curse techniques to his tool belt along the way, like curse speech and sky manipulation, there is really no telling how strong he can become, especially considering he's only 17 years old right now. And Gojo, for his part, felt like he was strong enough to take a serious punch from him, and Yuta did, although it did end up making him want to puke. Now it's finally time to discuss the one dubbed the strongest and the hypest character of the series, Satoru Gojo. But first, what does a special grade like Gojo like hitting even more than strong opponents? Why, the subscribe button, of course. So here's your chance to join the special grade fan by doing just that if you haven't already. But now back to Gojo. And of course, Satoru is the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer in the world, there's no debating that, and the man who could single-handedly destroy humanity. Season 2 of the Jujutsu Kaisen anime is finally giving us some insight into Gojo's insane backstory. Satoru Gojo was born on December 7th, 1989, and he is such a menace that after his birth, the balance of power in the entire Jujutsu world shifted. Gojo was the first person in 400 years to be born with both the power of Limitless and the power of the Six Eyes. And this was such a big deal that it resulted in curses becoming stronger after his birth. Basically, the good guys became so overpowered thanks to the appearance of Gojo that curses started getting stronger in order to compensate. I repeat, Gojo's birth literally threw the balance of the universe out of whack, and the universe had to start making curses stronger in order to make up for it. If that doesn't tell you how overpowered Gojo truly is, especially as an individual, then I don't know what will. Gojo was so powerful that the other important sorcerer families felt intimidated by him, and they were afraid that they would lose their own status because of this one member of the Gojo family being so powerful. These other families went so far as to put out a hit on him while he was still a kid, but all the bounty hunters who tried to kill him failed, and Gojo was able to develop into the charismatic powerhouse that he is today. In fact, Gojo is widely considered to be the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer of the modern era, and if you ask Gojo, he believes himself to be the strongest sorcerer of any era. According to Gojo's character profile in the first volume of the manga, he can do anything that he sets out to do, essentially making the impossible possible when he feels like it. On several occasions, he has stated that at full power, he could defeat even the legendary Sukuna in his prime. Gojo is so strong that if technology ran on cursed energy rather than gas or electricity, Gojo would apparently have the ability to power an entire large nation like the United States on his own. His powers are so great that they could pose a threat to the whole world if they ever ended up in the wrong hands. Geto has stated in the past that Gojo could potentially destroy all of humanity, so let's just be glad that he's one of the good guys on our side. Even though the Gojo family is one of the big three sorcerer families, along with the Zenin and Kamo families, Satoru is literally the only known member of the Gojo family. Satoru is the head of the Gojo family, but as I just mentioned, he also seems to be the only noteworthy sorcerer in the current generation of the family. And yet, because he is so powerful, he just kind of solo carries the entire family name and keeps them at the top of the food chain. The Gojo clan is originally descended from Michizane Sugawara, one of the big three vengeful spirits from the Heian period of Japanese history and a legend in the Jujutsu world. But there have been many Gojo clan sorcerers in the past, so what makes Satoru Gojo in particular so powerful, and why is he so special? As a member of the Gojo bloodline, Satoru inherited the prestigious Gojo clan technique known as Limitless. This curse technique brings the concept of infinity into the physical world, allowing its user to distort and manipulate space. In its base or neutral state, which is known as infinity, Limitless has the ability to stop anything and everything, including enemy attacks. Although technically the technique doesn't stop things, it just slows down their movements to such an extent that they may as well have been effectively stopped. Let me try to explain it more clearly using the very paradox that Gojo himself references when talking about his power, the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. The famed Greek hero Achilles is challenged to a race by a common tortoise. The slow-moving tortoise says that it can outrun the great Achilles as long as it is given a bit of a head start. Achilles believes himself to be the fastest man in the world, and there is no way that he could lose to something as slow as a tortoise, so he accepts the challenge, and the race begins with the tortoise having a 100-meter head start. Achilles rushes forward, determined to overtake the tortoise. He quickly covers the distance of 100 meters and reaches the point where the tortoise had begun the race, but by that time the tortoise managed to move 10 meters forward. Achilles then runs another 10 meters to reach the position where the tortoise was, but by the time he arrives, the tortoise has moved another meter. By the time Achilles moves again to the location where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved slightly forward again, and so on and so on. In the end, Achilles never catches up because there's always an increasingly small gap between him and the tortoise, but it's a gap nonetheless. Here's another way to think about it. Let's say you want to walk from one tree to another. In order to reach the second tree, you will need to reach the half point of the two trees, and then the half point between that point and the second tree, and then the halfway point between that new halfway point and the tree, and so on infinitely. If you keep dividing the remaining distance in half, you will never arrive at your destination, and at some point you will be moving so slow that it will look like you're not moving at all. This is a mathematical paradox, also known as Zeno's paradox. In mathematics, no matter how many times you divide a number, it will never go down to zero. It will keep going down to smaller and smaller fractions infinitely, but never to actual zero. In the real world, if you want to walk from one tree to another, you will easily arrive at that destination. You won't start infinitely dividing the distance you cover in half, you're just going to cover the distance. So this is a theoretical and mathematical paradox, not something that occurs in everyday life. However, Limitless actually brings this mathematical paradox into reality, which is really cool. So if something like an enemy attack tries to approach the user of Limitless, in this case Gojo, it will never reach him. Limitless transforms the finite amount of space between the attacker and Gojo into infinite space. The enemy attack will never make contact with Gojo because its distance from Gojo will just keep dividing itself infinitely. The attacker becomes Achilles and Gojo becomes the tortoise. Limitless is so powerful not only because it prevents enemy attacks from making contact with Gojo, but also because Gojo can expand the invisible infinite barrier that Limitless generates in order to completely neutralize enemy techniques and overpower them outright. And if that wasn't enough, there are multiple other techniques that Limitless allows Gojo to perform beyond just infinity. But before we get into the epic details of these other overpowered techniques, let's quickly talk about Gojo's other incredible inherited technique, Six Eyes. Six Eyes is an ocular jujutsu, and this ocular jujutsu allows its user to detect cursed energy and see the flow of it, as well as to instantly analyze his opponent's cursed techniques. On top of that, Six Eyes allows its user to have unbelievable precise control of their cursed energy right down to an atomic level, ensuring that the user of Six Eyes virtually never runs out of cursed energy because they are able to use it so incredibly efficiently. Basically, Six Eyes allows Gojo to use so little cursed energy that he never runs out, because he recovers it faster than he can spend it. His supply of cursed energy is not actually infinite. Both Yuta and Sukuna have more cursed energy than Gojo overall, but Gojo's efficiency in how he uses it makes it practically infinite. Six Eyes are essentially the perfect technique for mastering and unlocking the full potential of Limitless, and it is this unique combination of Limitless and Six Eyes that make Gojo the strongest sorcerer of the modern era. Six Eyes are so rare that no two people can possess them at the same time, and as I mentioned earlier, it's been 400 years since a single person possessed both Six Eyes and Limitless. A user of Six Eyes has visual powers beyond those of any other sorcerer. Gojo can literally see through a blindfold without a problem, and he can easily see what's happening several kilometers away. In fact, the reason why Gojo uses a blindfold in the first place is to avoid overly straining his eyes, because Six Eyes is a power that is always on and it cannot be deactivated. In chapter 71, the sorcerer killer Toji Fushiguro mentioned that he once went to see the legendary Satoru Gojo back when Gojo was still a kid, and Gojo was the only person who was ever able to detect Toji's presence even while Toji was standing behind him. Okay, so now that we've established what the Six Eyes power is, let's talk about all the ways that Gojo combines Six Eyes and Limitless in order to bring out the full potential of both techniques in absolutely spectacular ways. First, let's talk about Blue, also known as Curse Technique Lapse Blue. If Infinity is the base form of Limitless, then Blue is its strengthened form, and it is activated when Gojo amplifies the amount of cursed energy that he is pouring into the technique. Blue allows the user to bring more theoretical mathematical concepts into reality, this time the concepts of negative numbers and negative distance. Basically, Gojo uses Limitless to create negative space, and then normal space immediately begins to compensate by drawing everything towards the negative space in order to fill it. This allows Gojo to pull people and objects toward that space at great speed, similarly to the way a huge magnet works. This technique can be used with less intensity in order to pull in targets towards each other, and the same effect can even be used to make the user move at high speeds by pulling himself so quickly towards a specific destination that it appears as if he is teleporting. Gojo's ability to use Blue as a means of transport enabled him to become one of the fastest sorcerers in history. However, the technique can also be used with more intensity to pull apart entire buildings in an instant, or to completely destroy the bodies of enemies. Blue is a technique that is very difficult to use because it requires a lot of cursed energy, and it requires that energy to be used in an extremely precise way. Luckily for Gojo, the Six Eyes allows him to do exactly that. Next, let's talk about Red, also known as Reverse Limitless Red. Gojo uses the positive energy that comes from his reverse curse technique to reverse the effects of Blue. Rather than attracting objects and people like Blue does, Red repels them. If Blue is like two opposite charged magnets that are attracted to each other, then Red is like two similarly charged magnets, repelling each other. Gojo produces a small red orb on the tip of his finger, and when the power of the orb is released, it generates a massive shockwave that blows everything within the surrounding area away from Gojo. Red's cursed energy output is said to be at least twice the cursed energy output of Blue, which increases reduces the potential for collateral damage. Since Red requires the use of reverse curse technique, and since only a small number of sorcerers in history have been able to use this technique, Gojo is one of the only people to be able to use this technique in the history of the world. And even he had to work hard in order to learn to use it. It actually took a near-death experience for him to finally figure it out. And if you thought that Red and Blue were badass, then wait until I tell you about super secret fusion technique called Hollow Technique Purple. Purple is created through the merging of blue and red when the two opposite powers collide and imaginary mass is produced, and this mass has the ability to essentially erase everything in its path out of existence. Purple neither attracts nor repels, it produces a purple energy ball that simply annihilates everything it touches. The existence of this technique is such a closely guarded secret that members of the other prominent families, such as the Zenin clan, don't even know it exists, and thus they have no effective counter to it. As it should be clear by now, all of Gojo's powers are insanely rare and impressive, including Six Eyes, Limitless itself, and the various techniques derived from Limitless such as Red, Blue, and Purple. But we can't end the discussion on Gojo's power without talking about his greatest power of all, Gojo's domain expansion called Unlimited Void. Unlimited Void allows Gojo to bring himself and his target or targets inside of the Limitless itself. As the name suggests, the area within Limitless is an unlimited void that contains an infinite amount of knowledge and information. In fact, when a target is forced to enter Unlimited Void, their mind is immediately bombarded with endless information to the point of overwhelming them and rendering them completely immobile. The user and anyone he touches directly is immune from the effect, but the user's intended target will essentially lose their mind and eventually die if Gojo doesn't deactivate the power. The effect of Unlimited Void is so powerful that if a non-sorcerer is exposed to it for more than 0.2 seconds, they will suffer lasting consequences and death. In those 0.2 seconds, an entire 6 months worth of information floods into the target's mind, rendering them unconscious, and afterwards they will require like 2 months of therapy just to get back to normal. Although Gojo's Limitless and its techniques are among the most powerful abilities in Jujutsu Kaisen, and quite possibly they could be the single strongest power when taken as a whole, there are some ways that exceptionally strong opponents of Gojo can attempt to counter his techniques. Limitless can be countered by other exceptionally powerful domain expansions or domain amplification, and there are some cursed tools infused with specialized curse techniques that can interfere with the power of Limitless. But believe it or not, Limitless and Six Eyes are not even the only powers in Gojo's vast arsenal. Gojo is extremely strong and fast physically as well. He has incredible endurance and he is an expert in hand-to-hand combat. Gojo is also very tactical and a master strategist, and these important abilities are of course boosted by the Six Eyes, allowing Gojo to develop superhuman observational and analytical skills. Gojo is also capable of producing many other techniques including Black Flash, Curtain, Simple Domain, and Falling Blossom Emotion. Falling Blossom Emotion is actually a secret technique passed down within the big three sorcerer families that serves as a countermeasure against the domain expansion of your opponent. This technique can either nullify a domain's attack entirely, or it can reduce the damage suffered by the user in case their opponent's domain is incredibly strong. New Shadow Style Simple Domain also allows Gojo to counter enemy domains by neutralizing the can't miss attacks of the domain in question. Gojo doesn't normally need to use this technique, and he only uses it against the most powerful opponents. Finally, it is important to emphasize that Gojo's mastery of reverse curse technique also sets him apart from other sorcerers. Not only can he use this technique virtually continuously in order to heal his physical body in perpetuity, but Gojo could also use reverse curse technique to recover his burnt out curse technique after using domain expansion, allowing him to create multiple domain expansions within the span of only a few minutes. We can't forget that the vast majority of sorcerers who have a domain can only use it like once a day tops, so this is a huge deal. And after learning all of that about Gojo's spectacular powers and abilities, I don't think I need to tell you how dangerous these powers would be if they got into the wrong hands. If for whatever reason Gojo turned bad like his buddy Geto, or if he lost control of his body in some way, the entire world would be absolutely screwed. Like, imagine Sukuna in Gojo's body and how insane that would be. During the infamous Shibuya incident, Kenjaku and the other villains managed to seal Gojo inside Prison Realm, a special grade cursed object that contains living barriers constructed with the final remains of the Buddhist monk Genshin. The barrier has the ability to seal anything or anyone including Gojo. Gojo spends 19 days sealed inside the object, and then he is successfully unsealed by his allies. The unsealing takes place in chapter 221 of the manga. And this scene in which Gojo is unsealed tells us a lot about just how dangerous Gojo could potentially become. While preparing to unseal Gojo, Yuji, Shoko, Hakari, Angel, and the others realize that because physical time doesn't flow in the prison realm, there is no way to tell how Gojo actually experienced the time he spent sealed away. It might have been just a few moments for him, or it might have felt like he was alone for hundreds of years. Everyone is worried about what Gojo's state of mind might be like upon the release, and as Shoko points out, depending on his mental state, it could actually be dangerous to unseal him in a confined space. So they decide to unseal Gojo inside an abandoned mine in the middle of nowhere in order to avoid any potential destruction to the surrounding area upon Gojo's release. And even though Gojo is ultimately fine upon his release, and he just rushes to confront Geto right away, the preparations that his allies take before they release him confirm the fact that Gojo has the potential to be extremely dangerous. Like I've been alluding to, if Gojo was ever to become psychologically imbalanced in any way, or if he was to somehow get possessed by Kenjaku or manipulated in some other way, he would become a massive threat not just for the small community of Jujutsu sorcerers, but for all of Japan and the entire world. Gojo being Gojo, not only did his confinement inside the prison realm not unnerve him, but it actually made him stronger by teaching him how to create an extremely small domain, a domain that is so dense and refined that it is actually smaller than the size of a basketball. This insane durability and adaptability is what we love about Gojo, but it's crazy to think about just how screwed up the world would be if Gojo ever turned to the dark side. Most recently, Gojo has been leading in a fight against Sukuna and even managed to knock him out. Sukuna said himself he's as good as full power, and he even needed to take over Megumi's body to use Mahoraga just to have a chance. Currently, although Gojo appears to have knocked out Sukuna with Black Flash, he now has to deal with a Mahoraga that has adapted to his powers. But it appears like Gojo was right when he said he'd be able to beat Sukuna in his prime, especially one without Mahoraga's abilities. And finally, let's discuss Gojo's best friend Geto, the man whose body would be taken over by Kenjaku. Now there will be some overlap here because literally Geto's life overlaps with every other special grade sorcerer's life as we saw. And since we discussed Geto in passing during the explanations of the other special grade characters, we can just summarize the important bits here. As we saw, the dude experienced a 180. Whereas before, Gojo was the one saying it's a pain to look out for the weak, and Geto was saying society should protect the weak and keep the strong in check, Geto is the one who ended up wanting to eliminate the weak non-sorcerers who create curses. His ability to catch and release cursed spirits, including special grade cursed spirits like their Pokemon, is called cursed spirit manipulation. He used this overpowered ability so well that Gojo at the time considered himself and Geto to be the strongest. But as is hilariously revealed, when a Shikigami user tries to take him on close range, Geto is also very good at close combat and deals with him effortlessly. Later, Gojo reveals how much he trusts in Geto's abilities. Geto is worried about Gojo's state after the latter went so long without sleep, and Gojo says he's good, and besides, you're here too, he says to Geto. However, both of them didn't see Toji coming. Toji even beats the previous version of Gojo before his evolution to a stronger fighter who can use reverse cursed energy and his now signature red and purple attacks. So it's not surprising that Geto didn't stand a chance either. In fact, Toji only spared him because he wasn't sure what would happen with his curses if he died, and he wanted to avoid unnecessary trouble. During this fight, Geto unleashed the Rainbow Dragon, a curse that's supposed to have the toughest hide there is, but Toji cuts through it like it's nothing. By the time Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 0 happens, Geto is older, eviler, and stronger, but not strong enough despite being one of the strongest, which seems to be a recurring problem for him. He's introduced as one of the special grades, and specifically, like I said before, as the one who is considered the worst of all curse users. We're told that he was expelled from Jujutsu High School and that he's killed more than 100 civilians. Not good stuff to be known for. So clearly, he's no longer the guy who says that Jujutsu is for protecting non-sorcerers. At this point, he even insults non-sorcerers by calling them monkeys. Geto plans to destroy Jujutsu High so they won't stand in his way, but before that he introduces himself to Yuta, Maki, and the rest. They can't help but notice how fast he is. He talks about his goal of killing all non-sorcerers and realizing a world with only Jujutsu sorcerers. He declares war, and when Gojo says he won't let him get away with it, Geto responds that he shouldn't even try it since all of Gojo's precious students are within his range. Once again, it's impressive that he could declare war in front of Gojo and just get away with it. Geto planned to kill Yuta and take Rika, the Queen of Curses as he called her. He easily deals with Maki, Panda, and Inumaki. Against Yuta, he releases one of his special grade curses, Tamamo no Mae Incarnate. He also releases his most powerful attack, Maximum Uzumaki. He tells Yuta it's a good thing he came to kill him before Yuta learned to use his power. But all of his curses combined weren't powerful enough and Yuta and Rika won out. Once again later, Geto points out that Gojo purposely let all this unfold to trigger Yuta's growth, while Gojo blurs the line between good guys and bad guys when he said that he knew Geto wouldn't kill a young sorcerer without reason. He knew that his students were safe since Geto doesn't just want to cause suffering but to create a world for Jujutsu sorcerers, and so he obviously wouldn't kill them unless it's absolutely necessary, even if they do fight him. And then Kenjaku picks Geto's body to take over because of the potential of his cursed spirit manipulation. However, we can't really consider what Kenjaku does or how well he does in future fights to be the same as Geto, so Geto's own story stops here. After all, Kenjaku beat Yuki, but only because he had access to the curse technique anti-gravity, which was ingrained in Kaori Itadori. It perfectly countered Yuki's overpowered black hole attack that even cost her her own life. However, Geto would not have had access to this ability, and so would have been finished if Yuki even had to take it this far against Geto as an opponent. So now with that in mind, let's get into the rankings. I think it's pretty clear for me that Geto is the weakest. He was weaker than the strongest sorcerer Gojo, even before Gojo got his already mentioned significant power up. He lost to Yuta and Rika when Yuta was much less experienced than he is now, and Kenjaku only survived against Yuki because he had the power that Geto wouldn't have had access to. Then I gotta go with Yuki in third place, who made quite the impression and does have an insane potential for getting at least a tie against even the strongest of opponents by creating a black hole. But she's gone now as far as we know. Yuta, for his part, has been hyped up for so long, was able to beat Geto as an inexperienced kid, and Gojo even said that he has the potential to be as good as him, which he didn't say about Yuki. Yes, Rika, the Queen of Curses, helped Yuta beat Geto, but as we know now, he created that Queen of Curses in the first place, which again just goes to hype up his own power and future potential. And last but definitely not least, we got Gojo in first place as the strongest special grade sorcerer. It's been said many times throughout the series and this video and should come as no surprise. When someone just lasts long against him like Sukuna did recently, it's considered a massive feat, which just goes to show how strong this legend is considered to be. Not even Sukuna, the King of Curses, dared to challenge him with his own strength alone, knowing he'd have to rely on Mahoraga if he'd have any chance of winning. Now, cheating or not, if you want to know more about this dude who may end up taking down Gojo one way or another, the strongest sorcerer ever, then check out our recent video about Sukuna and why everyone is afraid of him. Link on screen right now. Make sure to like and subscribe to join the special grade fam, and I'll see you there.